All right. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us this morning. With us today, we have University College Explorers, Mandy James, with us to walk us through how we might be able to use AI when crafting our professional stories as working learners looking towards interviews that we may have, networking events, elevator pitches, all of those different scenarios are beneficial to have a professional story ready to go. So with that being said, Mandy, I will go ahead and pass it over to you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all for being here this morning. So I will just start by introducing myself really quickly. Thank you, Abby, for that introduction. And I guess I'll just start sharing my screen. Make sure I get that set up. I cannot do two things at once. Okay, is it sharing?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I know there's always that like weird little delay. Um, so nice to see everyone again. So I'm Mandy James. I'm an assistant teaching professor with the Explore program within University College here at ASU. I teach several different Explore courses, Life by Design, ASU 101, Uni 250, which we just renamed it. I believe it is now called Designing Your ASU Experience. And then a new course that I just developed is Uni 194 AI Enhanced Stories. And so that's where some of the inspiration for this workshop came from. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But just to give you a little bit of an overview for today, so we'll just kind of, do a little quick warm up. We'll talk a little bit about AI just so we're all kind of on the same page of what types of AI we're talking about. Then we'll talk about how you can use AI to enhance your stories. And then we'll have hopefully some time to play around a little bit, do some practical applications. So, as kind of a quick warm up before we get started, I'd like you all to take a moment to think about either your current job or a past job, and just think about one unique or challenging experience that you've had at either in your current position or a past position. And in like 1 to 2 sentences, described what happened and how you handled it. So, if you want to just take a few moments to write that down somewhere, and then I'll ask for a couple of volunteers to share out if anybody's feeling brave this morning. A lot to do in 1 to 2 sentences. And actually, while you all are doing that, I'm going to open up my BFF, ChatGPT. Save that for later.
And like Mandy said, this can be an example coming from your current position that you may hold, a past job that you may have had. It could also even come from maybe a difficult or unique challenge that you may have encountered in a class project or volunteer work that you've done. Again, any example like that would be great. And you're welcome to
Sorry,
come off mute. You can share it in the chat.
did I freeze up for a second?
Maybe. I'm not sure, Mandy.
Okay, just
Sorry.
making sure. No, that's okay. I think I did, but we'll see what happens. And then, yeah, if anybody has any examples, you can definitely put in the chat if you want to unmute and share those out loud. Whatever you are comfortable with.
Here. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So I guess I have a little bit of an example.
Perfect.
So this is from my class, and we had a team member that plagiarized some work for our group. So we kind of had to approach that, I guess, carefully.
Mm-hmm.
But Yeah.
So what kind of things did you do in that situation?
So we all sat down as a team and kind of talked about how we can source our designs a different way. And then also, obviously, why it's not right to copyright and that it also doesn't follow ASU standards.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That is a tough situation.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have an example that they'd like to share? Just something, unique or challenging experience you've had, either at work or in the classroom, because lots of interesting, fun experiences come out of classrooms as well, especially group projects.
I can share mine.
Thank you.
So during my internship this past summer, I was tasked to build business cases for all accounting projects that we had going on at my internship. And when I was told this, I kind of knew what a business case was, but I didn't know everything it entailed. So I had to use my network. I reached out to professors. I was asking around the office and, of course, doing research online as to what a business case was and what I was going to need, all the data I was going to have to gather for it. But yeah, I found a lot of external resources that were able to help me out.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That is always a tough situation. That is the beauty of internships, is that you do learn some of those kind of technical things. And it sounds like you really pulled from your network to try to figure out what that was. Did anybody refer you back to the person that assigned this task and say, ask them to clarify?
Yes, so
Okay,
a lot of people in the office did. Yeah, they're like, just ask, just
perfect.
ask. But I mean, I was nervous. I didn't want to
Hmm.
look like I didn't know what I was doing. So
Hmm. No, I can totally understand and appreciate that. So thank you so much for sharing that, both of you. And so the reason that I asked you to do this is you might not think about these examples in this way, but these are stories. These are stories make up your professional story, which is what we're talking today. And it might just seem kind of like a memory or something that was mundane, like just something that happened at work or school. But that is the power of storytelling. You can really turn anything, even the most mundane piece of information, into a captivating story. So, storytelling really is a valuable tool for showcasing all of your qualities in a professional context. And AI can help make that a little bit easier because it can be hard to turn that information into something that really grips somebody's attention. But before we get into how to do that, I just want to talk briefly about what AI is, kind of very brief how it works, just again, so we're all on the same page of what we're talking about. So AI in general, so I asked ChatGPT, which I always do. Basically, it's artificial intelligence refers to computer systems that are designed to perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. So it could be things like understanding a language, solving a problem, and generating creative ideas. So very general example of AI. And I think sometimes, I know the spectrum of liking and not liking AI is very wide right now. There are some people in all generations, all ages, like I've seen, some people are really embracing AI. They're really excited about the possibilities. Other people, not so much. And again, this is not just the older generations that are worried about it. I've had many students in my classes be a little bit concerned and nervous about AI. And so I think it's helpful to talk about there are all different types of AI as well. And some of them I would not even consider AI. So like Alexa, obviously when I think through it, I'm like, yeah, definitely that's an AI. But it's not something that would, if I was writing my own list of like what are different types of AI, that wouldn't have been at the top. And even things like Netflix, it uses AI algorithms to predict what we might like based on the patterns of what we watch and what we say that we like. So even things that we use all the time, I mean, I don't know if you're using Netflix every day, I definitely am. But even things we use all the time are using AI. And then there's different types. So Grammarly and ChatGPT are really great examples of something called generative AI. And that's really what we're going to focus on in this workshop. And Grammarly and ChatGPT are just two examples of generative AI. And so basically, generative AI is, there are lots of different types. So again, those two were just examples, probably the most commonly used. But usually you input a prompt, either words or images, depending on what platform you're using, and then it'll generate some information back for you. So again, depending on what you're using, it could be images, it could be video, code, words. But again, we're just going to kind of stick to those text-based ones for this. Those ones will work best for our purposes. But generative AI really is kind of like an advanced search engine plus a text generator. And so it doesn't have thoughts or emotions. It really searches through the data that it's been trained on, and it's looking for patterns. So it's not actually thinking and coming up with new ideas. When you give it a prompt, it's searching all of the things that are already out there and saying, this is how somebody might answer this based on how people have answered this before. So I think that's really important to understand. Using AI, I don't know how much you all have used like ChatGPT or Grammarly. It definitely takes some practice, and I am by no means an expert, so let me say that also as well. I've played around with it quite a bit, but there's still much, much more learning that I need to do. But the more you work with it, you kind of get a little bit better understanding how to talk to it, kind of, how to draft your prompts and that kind of thing. And so here's like a really nice visual. So you basically provide the AI with an input or a prompt, as they're called. It kind of uses a little magic wand to generate, it's kind of like searching through all of that information. And then at the end, it produces something for you. But very important part of this is that you are collaborating with it to come out with the final product. So again, I know there's a spectrum in terms of the use of AI even. And so what I'm really hoping is that you'll learn how to use AI to kind of enhance your writing and not kind of totally take it over. Like most things, there are certain limitations to ChatGPT, and I think some of the big ones are it can really feel like you're talking to a person. And I think it's important to remind yourself that this is not a person. Again, it is just generating responses based on patterns. So it's not coming up with new or creative ideas. If you're asking it to solve a problem, it's going to look through how that problem has been solved in the past and then come up with an idea. And so how do you think that that could be a problem either in the classroom or the workplace? If you want to put in the chat or if you feel like unmuting, but basically, why is it a problem? If ChatGPT is kind of recycling ideas and information that's already out there, how could that be a problem in the classroom or in the workplace?
It can cause accidental plagiarism.
Mhm. Definitely can cause accidental plagiarism because it doesn't always tell you where it got that information from. It just gives you the information and you're not really sure where it comes from. Anything else come to mind? And it was kind of a weird question.
Mandy, would it take into consideration if students were inputting similar prompts? It's not like verbatim the same exact prompt, but does it pick up and, I guess, push out similar responses if the prompt is similar enough? Which then
Yes.
could lead back to the comment of accidental plagiarism.
Yes, exactly. So if you think about it, let's say that you're in a history class. This history class is probably being taught a couple of different times this semester and probably has been taught. A lot of the same assignments are being used for the past 10 years. And it's not just being taught at ASU, but all across the world. And so if you think about all of those people, not that this is necessarily happening, but if all of those people use ChatGPT to generate a response, it would give very similar responses. And so instructors pick up on those kind of things. They'll see the same phrasing, they'll see certain maybe passages highlighted, like, wow, everybody's talking about the year 1857, which is not that remarkable for you. I mean, who knows? But it's definitely picking up on those patterns. And I think the same is true with the workplace and even with interviews. So we're going to talk a little bit about using AI for interview prep. But if you were to just say, give me an example of a time of like, answer this interview question for me, tell me about a time you used leadership in the workplace, and you just use that example and maybe changed a little bit to fit a situation, an employer might be like, hey, I've heard like 5 people today say that or use similar language. So it's important that you're really tailoring the information that you get because it is reusing information. So it's important to kind of look through that. So thank you for giving those examples because definitely it's helpful, but you just kind of have to really understand the output that you get. And then again, sometimes it'll tell you things that are just not right. So if you've ever heard of AI hallucinating, that's what it's called when it just makes up information. Yes, that does happen sometimes. And so one reason why I really try to limit the use of AI in my classes with like first year students is I really want them to have a deep understanding of what they're using the AI for, because you wouldn't know that it's wrong if you're not really well versed in that material. Now, luckily, you all are going to be using it to craft your own personal stories. You'll be able to know pretty quickly if that was right or wrong. If it started embellishing some things about your story, you could kind of take that out. But AI doesn't fact check. So if the data that it was trained on is flawed, then your results will be flawed. So it's the kind of same thing if you're cooking or baking and you have a bad ingredient, then your cake is not going to taste good. If you have bad eggs, then your cake is not going to be very good. It's kind of the same thing. So it's really important not to just take what AI says at face value, but maybe do a little bit of research. Even if it does cite sources for you, it has been known to make those up sometimes. So make sure that you're checking that source, that it is legitimate. And so it's really relying on that end result for you to kind of play around with the results to customize them. Okay, so we talked a little bit about AI. So now I want to talk a little bit more about stories. So storytelling really has been around. I'm just going to put all of these on the screen. Storytelling has been around forever. Like, I think sometimes when we think of storytelling, I think of images of people sitting around a campfire in front of a cave, like sharing different stories or drawings or things like that. But it really was how people learned new things, how we passed on new ideas, and how we connected and built community with one another. And I feel like storytelling is kind of having an era, a moment, if you will, because I feel like everywhere I look, I see something about incorporating storytelling or like how to use storytelling to show up your data or something like that. So, even data analysts are tapping into the power of storytelling. And so it's really interesting to see this everywhere. And I think, well, I'll ask you all, why do you all think that is? Like, what do you think the power of storytelling is? I know I gave some examples already, but any other examples of why you think storytelling is so powerful? If not, that's okay.
I mean, I'll say from the hiring side of it, storytelling just really makes a lasting impression and helps me understand. Am I freezing now? I can't tell.
Your voice is still going strong.
Helps an employer understand more about that individual and their lived experiences, more than what maybe shared on their resume or in a cover letter, just really grasping their level of knowledge with a certain piece too.
Yeah. And the reason for that is, and they're different. Some people are really good at telling stories. Some people, maybe it's a skill to work on. But I think, Abby, what you're describing is stories help us tap into emotions. And that's really what gets activated in our brain and kind of makes us tune in. Someone said storytelling creates a memorable shared connection. Yes. So when you're telling a story, someone else can kind of sit there and say like, oh yes, like I've been through that situation before. Like I've had a teammate who tried to cheat and I remember having to deal with that. Or I remember being new in my internship and not being able to figure out how to make a fax. That was always my thing. Is like when people actually had to fax stuff, I was like, how does this work? And so it does create that shared connection between different people. And that's actually so there's let's see, a good story can help you visualize the message. Yes, visualization is a huge part of this. It brings everything to life. And we are going to talk about that in just a moment. So there's a Lisa Cron is a writer who has studied the psychology of storytelling, which sounds very fun to me. But she's basically learned that humans are hardwired to pay attention to stories. So our brains are basically wired once we hear a story to like tune in and listen. Stories are what kept us alive. So if you think about it back again and kind of our hunter-gatherer days, we needed to know which berries were safe to eat and which ones were going to get us sick. And so if we heard a story about somebody who ate the purple berries and they made us sick, you better believe we are going to stay away from those purple berries. So storytelling used to be a matter of life or death. And so our brains have evolved to really tune in when we hear those stories. And so again, storytelling can also do so many different things. It can inform and educate us. So again, you might not think of it this way, but your class lectures are storytelling time. Some professors, again, are a little bit maybe better, more engaging when they're telling a story, but there might be some classes where you can sit through and listen to everything that's being said because that person's a really good storyteller. Storytelling can move us to action. So if you've ever watched a commercial and then at the end of it been like, yes, I need to have this gum. My life will totally change if I can just get this gum, if I have this insurance plan, if I have this car, that is moving us to action. That is the power of story. And that's, Abby, what you're talking about on the employer side of things. That's what you all want to do, is move the employer to action, because they're like, yes, if we only had that person in our life, in our company, then everything would work out. Everything would be wonderful. So we want to move that employer to action, which is hiring you. Stories help us make sense of the world. Like, we take in so much information every second. All of our senses are taking in information. That stories help us organize our information. And then again, as many of you mentioned, it really does help us connect with one another's. Again, very helpful when you're talking to a new employer. And so stories are so powerful for so many different ways, in so many different ways. So that's why we really want to harness the power of storytelling when you're crafting your professional stories.
Mandy,
So
that
I
just
have a little
makes me-
like, oh,
Oh,
sorry.
no, that just makes me think of too, like when I'm looking for a new product to buy, I of course am reading the reviews online, but I'm so
Yeah.
quick to go to TikTok because I want to hear a story. I want to hear the person's excitement around this product, or vice versa, the do not buy it because here's
Mhm.
why. Hearing the impact versus just reading it in an Amazon review is like game changer for me.
Yes. And I was even thinking some of people are really good at writing those reviews on Amazon, and you've seen these really well crafted things. But yeah, storytelling, it's literally everywhere. It's like AI, a lot of it we don't really recognize, like, oh, that's a story that I'm listening to, but everything is stories. And I think there's just ways to make a story better, more interesting, more exciting. Like, how do you hook someone using some of those storytelling techniques? So I want to give you an example of kind of the power of professional stories. So imagine that you're in an interview and somebody asks you to say, what makes you an effective leader, or like describe a time that you've used your leadership skills. And as you reply, you say, I'm a good leader because I know how to organize people and make decisions. I've led multiple group projects and always made sure everything was done on time. So not too bad, right? What do y'all think of that response? You can get some thumbs up, thumbs down, maybe scale of like 1 to 10, how strong. I'm seeing some. Thank you for that. Yeah, so it's like, okay, right? I think it's a little bland. Yes, 100%. It doesn't really tell us how you did those things, right? And I think that's the downfall in a lot of interviews, is just telling me that you were able to organize someone and make decisions doesn't really explain how you're able to do that. So if I'm the hiring manager, I'm the employer, I'm going to have a lot of questions about, like, okay, well, how did you organize the people? What were the decisions that you've made? What were the group projects? What did you do to make sure everything was done on time? Like, that's great that those were the outputs, but what did you do to get to that result? So again, yeah, a little bit bland, not a terrible response, a good first step, but let's see how AI can help make it a little bit better. I'm gonna put my acting shoes on. Show, don't tell. I like that. So I have a good example for that. Thank you, Catherine. All right. So imagine again, you're in the same interview, you're given the same question on kind of, a time where you had to show effective leadership, something like that. And you say, during my part-time job as a shift supervisor at a cafe, we had a major staffing issue one weekend when 2 team members called out sick. The cafe was packed and the rest of the team was overwhelmed. I quickly assigned the situation and reorganized the tasks, assigning myself to the cash register to keep the line moving while others focused on preparing orders. I also communicated with customers, apologized for delays, and ensuring they felt heard. By the end of the day, we had served over 200 customers with minimal complaints, and my manager later praised me for staying calm and keeping the team motivated. A little bit better than the previous example, right? So this one, for me, I can visualize myself being in this cafe and seeing this happen. I can see myself as a customer watching this happen. I can see myself as one of the team members, and I can see myself as this person. So just as Catherine said, this really shows an example of a time when you had to step up and take a leadership position. It doesn't just tell. And it's really giving a lot of specific examples as well. So while the first one might have been good, if someone comes in and interviews after you and they have this, we're going to remember this a lot more than the other one because we're remembering that visual that we've kind of created to go along with this story. Because yeah, and actually in my notes, I literally have stories. They don't just tell, they show your skills and values. So thank you for that. That was a great addition. So your prompt is kind of everything. So your prompt is where you really need to practice working in ChatGPT. And here are some different tips that you can use. I think the best tip is you can tell ChatGPT, you can give it such explicit instructions. So I think when I first started using ChatGPT, I had these really short things. Like I didn't think you could type too much in there. I don't know. I just had these really short, vague prompts. You really want to be as specific as possible. And I have some example prompts that I can show you that I'll show you in just a few minutes. But you really want to be clear, specific with your prompts. You can ask it for a certain style. So if you are going to a career fair, you could tell it that, like, I'm getting ready to go to a career fair and I want to have a few elevator pitches ready. Can you give me a few? Here are my strengths or something like that. If you don't know what to ask it, you can even ask it that, I'm going to a career fair. I'm not sure how to prepare. Can you help me? And it will even give you some information with that. And so include what kind of style you want. Are you looking for answers to interview questions? Again, are you looking for kind of elevator pitches? Are you trying to highlight something? And then you can always give it, it'll produce something and you can say, that's not quite what I was looking for. Can you try to make it a little bit more formal or maybe less formal? I think ChatGPT always goes for the way more formal. You could even say, could you add some humor to this? Maybe it was a situation that really didn't go well at work and you're trying to show, talk about it, but not, make it be this huge bummer type of thing, like a disastrous situation, and you want to lighten it up a little bit. So definitely always review, refine, and iterate, and keep asking it for different things until it gives you what you want, or you just do that editing on your own afterwards. So some different prompts that you can use. So definitely feel free to take some screenshots as we go through this. So I do have a couple of different versions of prompts, but one thing that you will want to do before you get started is kind of like write out the information for the example. So of course you need to give ChatGPT quite a bit of information about what you did, what the situation was, and using that star-based interview answer method. That's a really good way to get started. So if you're not familiar with the STAR method, it's basically a way to answer interview questions where you're again really showing. So STAR stands for the situation. So what was the situation you faced? What was the task at hand? What was the action you took? And then what was the result of that? So that makes for a really strong interview response because you're really, again, walking the employer through, this is exactly what happened. This is what I did. And this was the result. So you could do that for a bunch of different skills. So I really want to highlight leadership. So here's some situations, some tasks, some actions and results of times I use leadership, critical thinking, group work, technology, diversity, equity, inclusion. So all of those different things, you can have these examples written out, and then you can come to ChatGPT and say, I want to create a star-based story about leadership. Input, the situation was this, the task was this, the action, the result. Please craft this into a short professional story. And then it'll kind of give you, that's actually where I got that example from with the cafe story. So starting with the STAR method to really write out your different stories is really helpful. Another set of prompts that you could do is basically say, like I'm missing a slide, 1 second. Oh, froze up on me. Oh, that's so weird. I had an extra text box that is now. That's fine. Basically, there's kind of a formula that you could use. So you could say something like, help me craft a story about a time that I demonstrated this skill in the workplace setting. And then you can include those details about the situation. Write about a time that I went above and beyond to assist a customer, focus on the issue they faced, my solution, and how the customer responded. Again, you give it some information, it'll give you a nice little story. And then write a professional story about a time I overcame a difficult challenge at work. So you could look up different interview questions and kind of say, help me turn these answers into a story based on what I experienced, based on my examples. Okay, there's my formula. So the other thing that you can do that's really helpful is you could use the same example to highlight different skills. And so you might want to do this if you're, obviously if you're in an interview, you want to have different examples for different questions, but there might be some times when you need to adapt one story to different things. So maybe, rewrite this story to emphasize my leadership skills versus, critical thinking, and then focus on how I did these different things. So rewrite this story to emphasize my leadership skills, focus how I took charge of the team, delegated tasks, and kept everyone motivated during that challenging day. Or you could say, rewrite this story to emphasize my ability to work as part of a team, focus on how I collaborated with my coworkers, supported them during a busy day, and contributed to their overall success. So those two, it's the same story that you're using, the same situation, but you're adapting it for different purposes. So you could do that too, like, how do I turn this into a quick 30-second pitch for somebody? If you're like, this is a story that I need people to hear, you can ask it to do that too, and it'll give you a really quick story for that as well. So then the last one I did find, and Abby, thank you so much for putting, let's see, have you ever reached the recording limit?
That's from one of the AI note takers. Speaking of AI.
Oh, okay. No worries.
Yeah,
I was
did
like,
share in the chat some of the prompts that Mandy has shared on the screen, if that's easier for you all to copy and paste to practice yourself.
yes, thank you. And these websites are really helpful too. So if you want to put the links to the website. So these are just some examples of how you could prep for interviews using ChatGPT. So basically you could say something like, I'm getting ready for an interview at this company for this role. And you can literally type in like the job description, some important highlights about the job. And you could say, could you share, 10 questions that often come up in these interviews and provide guidance on how to give strong responses. That's super helpful. And then you can go in and update based on your own experience. And you can kind of see like, this is typically how people would answer this type of response. And then the other thing that you can do is you can ask ChatGPT to take on a role. So you can have it pretend to be the hiring manager and ask you questions, and then you can answer. So you could say, consider yourself as a hiring manager and ask me these questions on, you could say your specialty. I think that's what they mean by your domain. So like on project management. I'm going to provide an answer and then give me feedback on my answer. And you could even, this is so specific. This is kind of the beauty of prompt engineering. You know, what part of my answer stood out? What was missing? What did I do well? What might I have done differently? So this is so helpful as you're preparing for interviews. And then you can type it out, but you can also say it as well. So it gets just such a great interview prep. And then I actually found a really great article on LinkedIn that literally is titled ChatGPT Job Interview Cheat Sheet. Everybody should save this link because these are just a few of the prompts that I thought were super helpful, but it had so many different prompts. But it's like, you know, can you ask me a common interview question for, again, you know, graphic design? Can you help me craft a strong introduction for my interview for this role? Can you review and refine my story, make it more engaging for an interview? So you could ask it to add a hook to make it, you know, grab your audience's attention right away. And then can you suggest questions? Can you suggest insightful questions to ask about the company during an interview? So as hopefully you all know, at the end of an interview, you should always have a few questions to ask them. It really shows your dedication, your interest, your commitment to taking on this role. But it can be hard to think of those sometimes. So ask ChatGPT what would be some good questions to ask at the end of an interview. So that definitely save that link because so many great resources there. But I thought we could do a little bit of practice really quick and just see what ChatGPT comes up with. So hopefully we don't have too many gaps. But I'll put in, let's see, let me trying to think of an example. Does anybody have an example they want to use, or I can kind of like pull one? Did anybody have an example from the earlier warm up that they didn't share that they feel comfortable sharing? Cecilia, I'm going to take part of your answer about the case studies. So I'm going to say something. I'm preparing for an interview and want to, forgive my misspellings, highlight my critical thinking skills. Had at say during one internship, I was tasked with, was it case studies?
Business cases.
Business cases. Oh my gosh. Just really.
I'm a firm believer in it's because we're all watching you, and that's why.
Let's go with that. Let's go with that. Let's see. I used my network to okay. So I'm preparing for an interview and I want to highlight my critical thinking skills. So then I just said, you know, during one internship, I was tasked with creating business cases. And when I was unsure where to start, I used my network to help figure out what a business case was. In the end, I was able to complete the task and was praised by my supervisor. Can you craft a short professional story about this situation? So let's see what ChatGPT comes up with for us. So here's a polished version of your story. All right, so let's see. During an internship, I was tasked with creating business cases, a responsibility I initially found daunting as I wasn't familiar with the process. So already giving a lot more helpful information than the first story. Rather than letting uncertainty hold me back, I turned to my network, reaching out to colleagues and mentors to better understand what a business case entails and how to structure one effectively. Okay, I'm impressed, ChatGPT. With their insights and some independent research, I was able to break the task into manageable steps, aligning my work with the organization's goals. By combining critical thinking, resourcefulness, and collaboration, I successfully completed the assignment. My supervisor not only praised the quality of my work, but also commended my initiative in tackling an unfamiliar challenge. Experience reinforced my ability to adapt, seek solutions, and deliver results in new and complex situations. So that's a pretty good, it turned a pretty, I just gave it a couple of sentences. Now, you do have to go back and look at this and really ask yourself, okay, this sounds great, but is this really what the situation was? So you could always go through and tighten things up, take some things out. And then, does this capture the essence of the story? You could always say, yes, but my supervisor didn't know that I didn't know how to do it. Can you take that out? Or, you could edit that on your own. So you can really reiterate these different things with it as well. But this just really highlights like how you can take something, such a small example, and really turn it into a powerful story that an employer is going to remember. And it's highlighting things that you might think, again, are just like, well, that was just a normal thing to do. What was special about that? That's kind of like when you're talking to a friend or family member and they're like, wow, that's amazing you did that. And you're like, that's just what I do. It's giving that kind of external input, because I know it can be hard to talk about ourselves and kind of like play up our accomplishments. So this is a good way to help that out. So hopefully that kind of just highlights the power of using AI to kind of help craft your professional stories. Before we kind of wrap up, the last question I have, because if we're going to talk about AI, we have to talk about cheating. So do you think using AI in this kind of way, do you think that this is like cheating or unfair, like taking a shortcut? What do y'all think about that? If people wouldn't mind either unmuting or putting something in the chat.
Well, I know for me, I wouldn't use Chat GPT at first because I
Mm-hmm.
did feel like it was cheating.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the points that you mentioned as far as being very specific as far as what you type, any responses that it gives you, kind of critique it, re-edit it to sound more like you. I
Mm-hmm.
find myself asking it to take things out, to add things, to rewrite things, and then taking whatever responses it gives me and then kind of still tweaking it and putting it
Mm-hmm.
in my own words. So I feel a little more comfortable now using it. But a good point that was made today, as far as it pulling the information from anything that has been put into the database, that now still makes me a little skeptical. So I will, moving forward, now be more conscious of that because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
really think, I was thinking more it was my stuff that I inputted
Mm-hmm.
versus everyone's.
Yeah.
So now when I do that, I will definitely, be more specific as far as what I'm asking for. But normally I would just type up something, a paper, whatever it is, and put it in there and then ask it to kind of critique it based off of whatever it's needed for.
Mm-hmm.
That way I feel more comfortable and I feel like it's still my work versus
Mm-hmm.
bits and pieces from someone else.
Yes. Thank you so much for that response. That's honestly exactly what I was hoping to hear. Because I think a lot of people do see using AI as it's a shortcut or it's, cheating. It's somehow not your own voice. And I think, yes, if you just enter something in and say, give me this information, then it's not your own voice. And then, even though if we're talking about job preparation, there's no teacher, so there's no, cheating happening here. But it's unethical, maybe would be a better way to talk about it. When you get into a job interview, like, yes, you could use AI to have perfect answers, but pretty quickly that employer is going to know if you actually know how to do these things. So, like, yes, you told me a great story about this, but do you actually now know how to use that? And I think that collaboration piece is really important, as you mentioned, where you're not just taking what it says, but you're going through and editing and kind of putting your voice back into it. And I did this recently. I had to write an annual evaluation narrative of my teaching from last year. And I used ChatGPT a lot, but there were a lot of places where I was like, yeah, I don't sound like that. Or, you tried to make it sound a little bit more polished, but I'm going to put it back in my own words, how I said it here. And I also do ask it sometimes, take this information and change the tone or something like you mentioned. But I think talking about the privacy issue is important as well. So you do want to think about what information you're inputting into ChatGPT, because that just goes into that database, it's just going into all of that other information. So you wouldn't want to say, this is my name, this is where I'm working, this is, what I'm looking for. But I think it's okay to just say, I'm applying for a job at this company, this is the role. I think that kind of stuff is okay. But I'm glad to see that y'all feel like it's okay to use AI in this way, because it's really helping you to really highlight what you already have done. And so again, I know, especially with people who do awesome things, obviously you all are all awesome for being here today, but even talking about, I took the time to come to this workshop. Now you can put that in a ChatGPT and have a story ready to go. So kind of talking about that. So what I would say for all of you for kind of like what next is, this information I did steal from my colleague, Dr. Laura Shaw. She teaches a great course, Uni 270, which is a lot about preparing. It's like the stories, your professional stories. So she really helps students to kind of collect that information, keep a running list. And so she recommends keeping a running list of your experiences. So I know you all probably keep a resume that has your current jobs, but you should also keep a separate document, like a spreadsheet or something, that literally tracks your experiences that you've had. So again, if you had a situation at work like the one we saw, so busy, had to deal with all of these customers, there's 2 people called out, that should go on your experience spreadsheet. So this is the situation, this is what happened, do that star method for that. But then you can also then, even if you're not going in for an interview, put that in a ChatGPT and say, give me a professional story about this. Because you never know when you're going to bump into somebody, when you have the opportunity to highlight a different skill. So having like a running list of these stories will help make sure that you're really capturing all of the awesome things that you do, but just make it a lot easier when you do go to apply for a job. So I would say start keeping track of things, start crafting those stories using AI, or if you want to use, do that on your own. But either way, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier once you are ready for whatever comes next for you. So that is it. I'm open for any questions whatsoever. I did want to make a plug for my course. So Uni 194 will be offered in B session this semester. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how to turn anything, including professional stories, into kind of an engaging, more entertaining story, that class will be offered in B session. I believe it's Wednesday afternoons from like 2 to 3. It's 1 credit, it's pretty light in terms of course load, homework, that kind of thing. But let me know if you have any questions about anything. Feel free to email me if you, want to chat about anything. But thank you all so much for being here. Thank you all for sharing and participating. I know it's hard over Zoom, but I appreciate you all being here. So let me know if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Mandy, for joining us this morning, this afternoon, and sharing these different insights and prompts with us. I can't wait I already opened that LinkedIn, the cheat sheet you shared, to kind of look at that more, because I'm so like in awe over, again, just the way that we can be utilizing this kind of technology. Kind of like Drametta, I was a little hesitant at first and very much like, ooh, bad, this is cheating, they're stealing all of my information, I don't know what I'm doing, right? But absolutely getting more comfortable with it now, and realizing it's a good resource that we can be utilizing to help us be prepared, help us understand more about certain topics and things like that. So again, Mandy, thank you so much. For those of you on the call with us today, this session was recorded. So as soon as the recording's ready, I will send an email to you all sharing this recording. If you want to refer back to it, if you want to share it with a friend, highly encourage you to do so. But with that being said, again, thank you all for joining us. That does conclude our session today. We do have a session coming up next month. We'll be sending out some more information regarding those for everybody, but next month's session will be all about time management and organizational skills. So if you're interested in that, keep your eye out on your email on the Slack channel. But again, thank you all, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks,
everyone.